MPs finally got a chance to ask General Mkhwanazi questions today at the ad hoc committee. Did we learn anything new? What did MPs ask, and why does this matter in the wider story of Mkhwanazi's revelations? Stick around to find out. Spread the fire. Welcome back to the Sizwe Mpofu-Walsh experience, or SMWX. Nowhere else to start but right in Parliament, where General Mkhwanazi is delivering his testimony in terms of the allegations he made on the 6th of July, which have proved explosive in South African politics. Quick recap. In July, Mkhwanazi came out at a bombshell press conference announcing that Minister Senzo Mchunu was being influenced by criminal cartels who had taken hold of key parts of South Africa's criminal justice system. That sent shockwaves across the political spectrum. Mchunu was placed on gardening leave, and of course Mkhwanazi was then responsible for the creation of two different inquiries. A few people have asked me, what's the difference between the Madlanga Commission and what's happening in Parliament? The President set up a commission of inquiry, which is the commission, which is on a break right now. But Parliament itself, which is a separate branch of government, set up its own inquiry, both into the same allegations that General Mkhwanazi made. So while the Madlanga inquiry is on a break, Parliament's inquiry has kicked off, and now you're up to speed. So today was a really important day in the history of this story, because we finally got an interaction between MPs, members of Parliament, who we vote for and place in Parliament on the one hand, and General Mkhwanazi on the other hand, and they were able to interrogate, probe, and question Mkhwanazi's testimony and his witness statement. I want to kick off with what I think was probably the most important line of questioning, which came from Julius Malema today. And let me summarize why I think this drew some of the most important answers. Malema kicked off in quite an interesting strategic fashion by taking a jab at the Zuma presidency, because Mkhwanazi has said that in 2011, when Zuma was president, he failed to act on complaints that Mkhwanazi made about political interference. And Mkhwanazi was himself placed on leave for a year, getting a full salary, because he refused to bow to political instructions that he believed went beyond the bounds of what politicians were allowed to do, which is an interesting opening point. Apart from that, he spoke about Mkhwanazi's history, because not only was he getting Mkhwanazi testimony, but he was also saying to MK Party, well, look, your leader is also part of this deeper problem. After that, he actually took aim at this narrative that has been building, that Senzo Mchunu kind of didn't write this letter that he signed, and made an important point that in actual fact he did sign this letter and therefore must take responsibility for signing this letter, which tried to disband the political killings task team. This letter is really important, because had Mchunu not signed that letter, we wouldn't have evidence that he was pursuing the purported agenda of a criminal syndicate on Mkhwanazi's version.
Now, if you say the minister did not write a letter, and this is not the same person I see who smiles all the time when we meet, and the one that I see in the letter, two different people, will that be an excuse that someone gave a minister a letter and the minister signed? Because he doesn't dispute that is his signature. Once he signs, that is his letter. And we can't say minister didn't know, someone misled the minister, because I don't understand which angle are you trying to take there. The minister signed a letter. Even if he said, I didn't read the letter, I just signed it. It is his signature. It means he didn't do his own duties by making sure that he reads through the documents before he signs them. Is there any excuse why shouldn't we hold this letter against the minister himself as his own letter?
Well, it is the minister's letter. When I registered a complaint, a criminal complaint, minister is one of the suspects that I'm pursuing in that complaint I have.
We also heard that Mkhwanazi has opened a criminal case involving, among other people, Senzo Mchunu for obstructing justice because of this attempt to disband the Political Killings Task Team. And we heard questioning around Paul O'Sullivan, the independent investigator, as he's known, where Malema asked a series of questions, and we know that Mkhwanazi and O'Sullivan have crossed swords because after Mkhwanazi's allegations, O'Sullivan came out in the media attacking Mkhwanazi. Mkhwanazi has responded with a defamation lawsuit, I believe, and Malema really asked questions about O'Sullivan's history, his proximity to President Ramaphosa, and Mkhwanazi effectively answered many of those questions on the role of Paul O'Sullivan in criminal justice in South Africa. We then had an interesting move to talk about the criminal justice system. And here, Malema asked an important question because he asked, when you had your press conference, you said the judiciary was involved in this attempt by the criminal syndicate to take over parts of the state. But at the commission, all you could really muster was one magistrate who had wrongfully granted bail under suspicious, at best, circumstances. So are there really judges involved, or is it just one magistrate? So a field there of the questioning in the committee. Now, when we look at the question of judges, Mkhwanazi then comes back and says, this was quite a moment in the committee. I can't speak about this in public, but if we go in camera, which is effectively outside the public view where the committee sits and the media and public aren't allowed, I will say things that will shock you. And Malema asked, are you sure you're speaking about judges here, not just magistrates? And Mkhwanazi confirmed that. Now, this brought out a theme that was a little frustrating as a member of the public here, because Mkhwanazi was constantly asked to give more detail, give names, give the committee and the public a sense of who exactly is involved here. And he couldn't do that because he said it would impact the public negatively or impact investigations. So I think those of us who were really waiting for everything to be blown open didn't get that. But we did get a confirmation that Mkhwanazi believes he has the evidence, which he is prepared to reveal in camera to reveal some of these deeper claims. We also had a section in this questioning about the role that the drug trade is playing within these cartels and how they affect government. And there, Mkhwanazi suggested there was a consignment of drugs that somehow got stolen, and within the criminal justice system, it ended up at a Hawks office and then got stolen from the Hawks office, made its way to Gauteng, and that consignment ended up at the center of a number of high-profile celebrity murders because it got taken out of the control of the cartel. It wasn't fully clear exactly what happened, but people started stealing parts of this consignment for themselves, and there was retribution. So there was quite a lot packed into this session. And I would say the one thing that I was a bit disappointed by, both in this line of questioning, but also in the wider line of questioning, was we didn't get much on the president and the president's role here. MPs didn't really probe this to my satisfaction, because I think this is a crucial line of questioning. So, for example, Malema asked, did Ramaphosa know about the disbandment of this task team? And basically Mkhwanazi was like, well, I don't think so, because when I spoke to him, he seemed shocked. And then Malema moved on to another question. I would have really liked many more follow-up questions. By the way, I'm shooting this and there's still a whole nother session tonight, because apparently this committee is just a late night committee, late night jams in Parliament. But I'll come back to that when I do my analysis tomorrow. So we have quite a lot going on here. Interesting questions, interesting answers, but also some frustrating responses that don't quite give us the detail we need to pin down exactly all the people who are involved in this conspiracy that Mkhwanazi has proposed. So let me go to some other MPs who I thought made useful interventions. you had the Honorable Kohler from the ANC, and he asked a number of good questions, but I just want to give you a sense of how he was trying to, again, probe at some of these details that we didn't get answers to. Here's an example of the kind of thing he was asking.
In general, let's move to IDEC prosecution, judiciary, and correctional services. And I will plead with you once more that where a necessity arises for you to mention a particular name, please feel free to do that.
And in response, again, Mkhwanazi couldn't say the names out in public, but he promised that if it went in camera, he would say the names. Now, Kohler did well to, at each juncture of the story, say, okay, you said this was happening. Who specifically are you talking about here? And I think that was a strategic line of questioning. And it compelled Mkhwanazi at multiple instances to say, I'm sorry, I can't tell you the answer to that. And again, quite frustrating for a member of the public, because it's like, we've had this big press conference, we've had this big announcement that there are serious, powerful people involved, deeper than just the names that have been mentioned. But when we have this public process to then finally find the names, we realize we can't hear them. So that can be a bit anticlimactic, even if there are good reasons not to reveal the names. Now, in terms of the DA, they asked some questions more around the structure of the police, the proposal Mkhwanazi's made about the devolution of policing functions, which basically means that provinces should manage their own policing rather than it all being centralized at the top. And Ian Cameron, who's also the chairperson of the Police Portfolio Committee, where Mkhwanazi appeared in March, asked questions around why Mkhwanazi didn't give more detail in that Portfolio Committee briefing in the same way that he did in the press conference of July, because had he done that, Cameron argued, Parliament would have been able to take it a lot more seriously. Now, we also had MK and the EFF asking questions about the Richards Bay minerals. Now, this is something that has kind of been a sub-story but hasn't really been picked up a lot. But I do think there's something that we need to keep pulling on here, because it seems to me that Mkhwanazi was asked, look, have you ever, as a provincial police commissioner, been asked to go and protect a private company? And Mkhwanazi said, no, this was the first time I'd ever seen that. He apparently now, according to his testimony, ended up in meetings with this company, and there were deployments to this company, and he felt eventually that the deployments were more like private protection than community protection, so he withdrew. But when he withdrew, he was told that the presidency didn't like what he did. Now, he was asked by Leanne Mates from the EFF, who was this person? And again, he just said the message he got was that the presidency isn't happening. And he said the presidency could be the deputy president, the president, advisors, chiefs of staff, ministers in the presidency. So again, but it is strange that we have this major mining conglomerate, because Richards Bay Minerals is a sub-entity of Rio Tinto, which is a mining giant, a global mining giant. And there has been reporting of meetings between President Cyril Ramaphosa and the CEO of this big mining giant. And so it does beg the question, why was there such governmental interest in sending the police to this mine? Perhaps there were perfectly good reasons. Perhaps there was crime happening in and around the mine. But I would like to know a bit more about that, because it reveals the worrying nexus between political power, economic power, and the police. And that's really the nexus that we're also talking about with these criminal syndicates, right? These criminal syndicates are a form of private power that have a relationship with the police and the government through politicians. But we know this is a familiar story because we know that private companies have always been able to exert outsized influence over our government. If we look back at, for example, the Marikana situation, where Lonmin, a mine that traced its financial residence back to London, was able to, actually through President Cyril Ramaphosa, put a lot of pressure on the South African police during the Marikana massacre. So I want to know more about this RBM situation. Now, In questioning from Ashley Sauls of the Patriotic Alliance, Mkhwanazi also spoke about how he believes there was a plan to arrest Police Commissioner Fani Masemola. So there was a full-on plan, which he links to the plan to arrest Dumisani Khumalo, which actually happened. So the idea was to neutralize Khumalo, who's the crime intelligence boss, who apparently was also busting these syndicates, Masemola, who was largely on the side of Mkhwanazi, although he's been a bit wobbly under testimony because sometimes he agreed to the disbandment, sometimes he wanted it to be postponed. So fascinating stuff. I also just want to give you a sense of what happened late last night because I released my analysis before the end of the committee. There was this warning given to DAMP Dianne Kohler Barnard. She had been implicated by Mkhwanazi in the Madlanga Commission, where he alleged that she had divulged protected information or secret information or classified information improperly and potentially leaked it to the media or asked questions about that information at the wrong forum so that it would become public. And Kohler Barnard responded that that was outrageous, that any linking her to the criminal syndicate was a step too far, and that Mkhwanazi should publicly apologize to her when he came to Parliament. Well, this was his response to that.
These things that we've put on this statement is just a tip of the iceberg. Go to the media tomorrow, honorable member, and say things again. I'm going to come with another evidence. Yes, my submission.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay. Next time someone challenges you on WhatsApp, just say, I'm going to come with another evidence if you go to the media. It was real. It was very real. Mkhwanazi didn't apologize at all, and he actually challenged Kohler Barnard to continue to criticize him in the media, and he said he would be able to reveal more evidence. Kohler Barnard, as far as I'm aware, has not responded to that. There was a big question about whether she would recuse herself because she might end up having to be someone who puts her side of the story across as a witness at the committee. But it would be strange, based on principles of natural justice, to have someone who is both in the side of judging and sitting in judgment, as committee members are, and also providing evidence or being someone who's being questioned. The age-old adage of nemo judex in causa sua, you can't be the judge in your own matter, would appear to rear its head here. The DA seems to have taken a bit of an intermediate stance this morning, saying that Kohler Barnard was coming in via Zoom. She wasn't actually at the sitting and she wasn't going to participate. And so I thought there was going to be a big debate this morning. But I think luckily, because we want to get to the business of the day, it has been kind of diverted for a while. But there will ultimately be a big debate about whether Kohler Barnard should recuse herself. Cool. So that's where we are. Where are we going? Tomorrow, National Commissioner Fani Masemola will be before the committee. This is the last day of Mkhwanazi's testimony. I suspect it's going to run long into the night. And then we'll hear from the police commissioner. And basically what that will mean is that roughly by the end of this week, at both the Madlanga Commission and the Parliamentary Ad Hoc Committee, we would have heard from the same witnesses, except for Khumalo, whose testimony hasn't finished yet. So we will have heard from Mkhwanazi and Masemola in two different fora. What I'm really interested is in next week, where suddenly it's going to shift and we're going to have different people appearing in different fora, and we're going to be able to put the pieces of this puzzle together much quicker because these committees and commissions are going to be working in parallel with each other. And so we will then be able to bring you analysis from what happened in Parliament and at the committee so we can put the pieces of this puzzle together. Fam, SMWX fam, it's been great. I love your comments down below. I love the community that we're building here. It's obvious that this channel is just under a sensational moment of growth. So thank you very much for continuing to watch, continuing to share with the people around you. You know, on this channel, we have this motto, which is spread the fire. what does that really mean? It means like from the first time I ever made a video, I asked the people watching to spread this to the next person and the next person, and to share it with that friend who is interested in politics, who you always talk about politics with, or with your parent who you always are engaged in these conversations about the country and its present and its future with. And over time, over the last 5 years, the fire has spread to the point where we are now one of the biggest podcasts, not even just current affairs podcasts, biggest podcasts in South Africa. But we can't stop here. We've got to keep spreading the fire, because we're right at the start of this moment, and I'm going to help guide you all the way through this commission, this committee, and South African politics. We've got an election coming up. There's so much that we're going to interpret together, because if there's one thing that unites us as South Africans, it's being shocked, but nonetheless resilient in how we respond to the drama that is this wonderful and terrifying nation. So have a good night, fam. I'll see you tomorrow. I'll be here for another analysis. Keep it locked on SMWX, and I'll catch you on the next one. Aye.